Welcome to this week's edition of Rugby Unfiltered. I'm your host, Jan de Quinne, and with me, as always, Eugene Eloff.
Hey Jan, yes man, and what a weekend of rugby, man. It's student rugby, is URC, it is Six Nations. I don't know where to kick off. What do you think?
Yeah, Eugene, I think we talk so much about international rugby and the URC, and we will touch on that. We're going to speak Six Nations, all that stuff. But I think it's a good point to start. We've had 2 rounds of the Varsity Cup. It's great rugby, and it's a wonderful tournament. It's wonderful to see stadiums full. You know, I mean, we look at Stellenbosch. They always have a big crowd there. We look. Some of the games had a bit of rain, so you can't really judge the cloud. But I think in general, the atmosphere and the passion for Varsity Cup is absolutely amazing.
Yes, Jan, that is always a guarantee, because every year you've got new students coming in, you've got your first years coming in, so that's there, and the spirit is there. Some interesting results, and I was fortunate last night to be at the UCT CUT game, and you know what? You must give them credit for the great innovation of Varsity Cup, and there are rules and stuff that change, but just watching the students, some of them don't even watch the rugby; they're there for the gears. But when the team score, they're up and they're shouting. So yeah, it's actually lovely. I agree with you, seeing the spirit at the universities.
Eugene, we've got 2 very special guests on this week. One is Freek Burger, a resident referee expert, who's going to tell us a few things about the laws and events of the weekend. And we'll get to that later. But we've got a lady called Anushka Swart. She's the boss of Varsity Cup Rugby. And she's got an interesting history. And I think, we always see rugby as a men's sport. And yes, it is dominant, and most people still watch the men's game. But the women getting more involved. And this is not about the women's game at Varsity Cup. It's about Varsity Cup and how it's evolved over the years. And I think it's we'll chat to Anushka now, but she's got such an interesting story to tell. And I think that's what that innovation, you spoke about innovations. And some of the innovations that Varsity Cup has come up with are being implemented by World Rugby. So we can credit these people at Varsity Cup for really good innovations. I'm sure there's a few that people don't like, and we'll chat about some of those with Anushka. But it's great to see that they always try something new, and it's the right place to try new stuff and to entertain.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is about entertainment, and if you look at the American model, that's why they get why they get these attendances so great. And I'm sure later you're still going to talk about the laws and so on, which I thought last night watching UCT play. When you score a try, you can get the ball again for 2 minutes, and on the same line as where the keeper would have been, and you've got 2 minutes. So last night, on my way back from the game, I thought about it, and I'm not going to talk about the law per se, because we've got our specialists there. But as a coach, I have to play with what I'm dealt with. And there I've got 2 minutes. And I would like to see more innovation from the coaches, working out the strike move from that 2 minutes. Not just tapping and playing and maybe setting up a pod and playing off the cuff to maybe create a mismatch and score. I would say work out a strike move from there to create that mismatch and score, because it can be a bonus. In a game, you can be 14 points, 13 points behind. You could win a game. So, yeah, that's something I just picked up. I know I'm also very skeptical when there are law changes like that. But coming back, it also brings a bit of excitement and something renewal to the game.
I think now's a good time to bring Anushka in and chat to her about all these inventions and the history of Varsity Cup. So let's welcome Anushka Swart, the boss of Varsity Cup Rugby. Anushka, thank you very, very much for joining Rugby Unfiltered. It's wonderful to have you on our podcast, and hopefully you can give our viewers some insight. So tell us, who is Anushka Swart, and how did you get involved in Varsity Cup?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate the opportunity. So my Varsity Cup journey actually started while I was still a student at Varsity at Tshwane University of Technology. And I actually just started through Varsity Cup as being a runner. So that's basically the person that does all of the groundwork, basically all of the volunteer work. And that's when I started with rugby. And then in 2020, unfortunately, COVID happened, obviously, so our competition got cut short. But in 2021, when we had the Varsity Cup bubble back here in Pretoria, I actually was a runner back again with the Varsity Cup team. Really enjoyed the time in the bubble, working with all of the different teams. And from there on, I just started growing into the space. I became a match rep in 2022, and then was also officially taken onto the operations team for the FNB Varsity Cup. And recently, well, basically from this year onwards, I officially became the FNB Varsity Cup tournament manager. So basically taking the lead on this project.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting journey. I mean, we all know Varsity Cup started in 2008. I mean, John Dobson, the Stormers coaches or director of rugby, was then Ike's coach and stuff. So a lot has changed in the last 2 decades. But talk to us about since your arrival and exactly what has happened in the last 5 years.
So look, Varsity Cup has always been about innovation. There's a lot of things that has changed since then. In 2022, we had an adaptation of the 50-22 rule, the law that we've implemented in Varsity Cup. It was taken up into World Rugby. Recently, for this year, we have the new tap and kick rule that we've implemented for the 2026 season. So very interesting to have seen that play out so far. We've also actually, while I am still working there, we also added the FNB Varsity Cup Women's Tournament, which is also quite an exciting part of the tournament for us.
Yeah, you talked about the innovations and stuff. So maybe this is a good time to ask you. Please describe us probably the best innovations that you've seen in your short period, and maybe you can reflect a bit on the ones before you became so heavily involved, but perhaps the best innovations that's come around.
So from Varsity Cup, look, like I said, we've always been huge on innovations. Really enjoy bringing some new things in for rugby that keeps it exciting. So I think one of the most exciting things that we still implement is the pink shorts that a player wears. So this basically starts at the beginning of the tournament. The captain gets to wear a pink short during the first match of the season. And after that, a player that has won player of the match in the previous match gets to wear pink shorts in the second, in his next match. So that's a very exciting part of our competition. Another one that stands out quite a lot is that FNB Varsity Cup was the first tournament to implement the 23-man matchday squad in South Africa to see if it would actually, work this side, especially with regards to uncontested scrums and bringing in the additional prop onto the bench. So that's something that really stands out. Also, the red card rule that we've implemented in 2017. Where a player, obviously, once he gets a red card, gets sent off the field, but the team actually gets to bring in another player from that matchday squad after 20 minutes. Like I mentioned, the 50-22 variation. And then recently, like I mentioned, the 2026 rule was the tap and kick, where a team can now, once they've scored a try, decide not to go for the conversion, and they can actually try to go for an additional try by moving back to the 22-meter line, tapping the ball, and then trying to attempt another try within 2 minutes. So that's been quite interesting. It's been very exciting to watch. So yeah, we're keeping it exciting.
Yeah, some of those, the 23-man squad and the red card is now obviously implemented by World Rugby. But I want to briefly stop at the 23-man squad. So you guys are basically giving Rassie his bomb squad.
Basically, you can say so.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting. I mean, some of the stuff didn't work. I mean, there's obviously stuff that didn't work and that wasn't re-implemented. But it's so talk to us briefly about the tap and go, because that's an interesting thing. And do you think the guys are actually cotton on, or does that need to evolve in terms of the coaching?
Look, so when we actually first told the coaches about the rule, the coaches were obviously some of the first people to know about the rule. They actually did mention that they would be practicing this rule. So, look, I personally don't know how exactly they're practicing it, but they definitely are practicing this rule. Some of our coaches are very keen and very exciting to try it. some of our coaches are more of the older generation, so they're not necessarily always keen on attempting it. But in the matches that I've watched so far, all of the teams have actually attempted to go for the tap instead of just going for the conversion kick. We've had some teams actually scoring from those tries. Yesterday, Emirates, who was previously known as Varsity College, actually managed to score from that tap attempt, and they actually picked up their score a little bit. So it's quite exciting to see, the teams are implementing ththese innovations.
Yeah. We spoke about the innovations, but the buzz is still there. I think the thing for me is Varsity Cup's about a buzz. I don't want to knock any other competitions, but we know how empty Ellis Park is. But you guys, if you look at Stellenbosch and you look at Aitjies, and you can just see the stadiums, it's full. Why do you think as Varsity Cup managed to keep that buzz for 2 decades?
Look, so as much as Varsity Cup is about the rugby, it's also about the fans. So we're trying to keep it, interesting for the fans. We are running some amazing fan competitions, to keep the crowd there. We have handouts at all of these, and we're just bringing a nice vibe, a nice experience. Everyone always talks about their varsity days, and they always include a little bit of a story about Varsity Cup. So, we're just trying to keep the student life, up and running. So I think the biggest thing is, the interactions that we also have on social media. Like I mentioned, the competition. So we actually have quite an exciting one this year, where one of our fans stand a chance to win a Suzuki car, courtesy from our sponsor, Suzuki. So I think students actually always want something, not just, something physical, but also an experience. So, and we provide both of those things to them at these matches.
Yeah. The other thing, we've seen the Shield and the Young Guns, and most recently, like you mentioned, the women's competition added. So what's next for Varsity Cup?
Look, so we are actually celebrating our 20-year anniversary in a few years coming. In 2028, we are celebrating that. Our big focus at the moment is also growing our women's competition a little bit bigger as well. At the moment, we are only 6 teams in our women's competition. So we are looking at growing it into 8 teams in the future. And from there, you never know. Like I said, we're bringing all the innovations. So with the 20 years coming up, I think there's quite a lot that will be coming through.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot now. Who's going to win the Varsity Cup this year?
Look, that is quite a difficult one to answer. Not just because I do have to say quite neutral, but we've seen in the first 2 rounds, it's already been crazy. Well, everyone is everywhere. UJ actually gave us a shocker yesterday. They almost beat Marty's. So look, I don't even have an answer for you at this moment. Maybe in the middle of the competition, there might be an answer. At the moment, it's still out there for any team to take the win.
Anushka, it's been fun. It's wonderful to chat to you. It's nice to chat about something different in rugby. And hopefully we'll have you on the podcast soon again.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. It was lovely to chat to you as well.
Eugene, that was very interesting from Anushka. And I think it's wonderful that Varsity Cup has evolved like that over the years. And it's a wonderful invention. And I think a lot of countries, we know there's big varsity matches like in the UK and so on. But I think Varsity Cup in general in South Africa is a breeding ground, and we've seen a lot of players. We can just look at the Eben Etzebeth and those guys who came through Varsity Cup, and when they were playing Varsity Cup, people didn't think much of them, and now they're world stars. Etzebeth, the most capped player in South Africa's history. But let's move on to the URC and the Six Nations. I think let's briefly touch on the Six Nations. And when we bring in Freek Burger just now, he's got some interesting things to say about the laws in that game that was applied in some of the Six Nations game. But France is dominating. They beat Ireland in the first round. They then beat Italy quite comfortably, and they look on par to everybody said that France-England game in the last round is going to be the decider. The fact is, England is virtually out of the running. They've lost 2 in a row. They lost to Scotland. They lost this past weekend again to Ireland. And, well, they got demolished by Ireland at Twickenham. So, the Six Nations literally is turned into a race almost between Scotland and France, who are playing this coming weekend.
Yes, Jan, it's actually very exciting. And I think most of South Africans were very, very pleased this weekend with the outcome of the Ireland-England game, especially after last year, the end of the year tour, when England was very verbal on social media and in the media that they are the #1 team now. They're ready for the World Cup and they can scrum any team. Ireland demolished them. I think Ireland played clinical. They were so ready for this game. And once they disrupted England's slow poison, England couldn't go forward, couldn't get momentum. It was just, I think it was one of the better performances I've seen Ireland play. France, we knew would just be too much for Italy. And then I was pretty much surprised, and I actually felt for Wales in that game that they didn't win it. But it also showed the tenacity and the resilience and the cool head that Scotland kept. So that is wide open. But I think the one lesson for all coaches and unions, so on, don't blow your bugles too early and don't light your fires for barbecues or braais before the season's not over. So rather to stay out of the media, keep quiet, and just prove yourself on the field between those four lines.
Yeah, England's got a big problem. I mean, Steve Borthwick's been there now, and they've got the same thing. They try to evolve a little bit, and then it goes pear-shaped. And they've got the same problem now. Once the like you say, the slow poison. Once that physical game is matched by another team, they have nothing left. We've seen that in World Cup finals against South Africa. We've seen it in World Cup semi-finals against South Africa. They always seem to revert back to that physical game and a kicking game, which works for them at times. But once you match their physicality, they've got nothing else. So they become so predictable. And when you've got a coach, and Steve Borthwick was a hell of a good player, and he's a good coach as well. I'm not knocking him as a coach, but he's not flexible enough. I mean, if we talk of Steve Borthwick against Rassie Erasmus, it's chalk and cheese. Rassie evolves all the time. He's flexible. He changes. He tries things. Steve Borthwick comes with the same thing, and that's why teams can work England out so easily.
Yes, Jan, I think the team let him as a coach down. And if you look technically, they didn't start too badly, but with Ford, who I think is very inconsistent as a fly-off, and he's a general in the team, kicking directly out with those two penalties where they could have got momentum, maybe a ball, set up a ball and score tries, get momentum. I thought that took them out of the contention. That brought Ireland, that lifted Ireland's game. But what I lacked in this England side was composure, which you always have. And to me, there was a lack of leadership in the team itself. And but I mean, that's about what you can say. Rugby is a strange game. Sometimes if you don't pitch up, don't think things don't go your way, you need to take one step back, slow down, regroup, and because you got so much minutes on the field.
Eugene, also we've got the URC this weekend, and it's a very, very important. And I know it's a big round, and there's all sorts of matches. And the big log has got Glasgow Warriors at the top, then Leinster, and the Stormers are still sitting third. But it's more on the SA Shield side where things are very, very interesting. Let's call it the dark horse or the red horse or whatever you want to call it. But the Lions, if they beat the Stormers this weekend at Ellis Park, they can win the South African Shield. A couple of weeks, a month ago, nobody would have said, it was between the Sharks, who's the holders of the Shield, and who got beaten by the Lions this past weekend. And suddenly the Lions are in the running. And if the Sharks are traveling to Loftus, so if the Bulls beat the Sharks and the Lions win at Ellis Park, they win the Shield, which is a massive, it's years. I think it's 4 or 5 years since the Lions won any silverware in any competition.
Yes, Jan, it will be fantastic if they can do that. And as we know, up there in the Highveld, if the teams from sea level can play up there, you speed up the game, you speed it up for 80 minutes, and eventually the air goes very thin. It's not going to be a walkover, but it's going to be a tough ask for the Stormers to go up there, especially after their previous performances. But we also know that if they get the ball, if they use the territory well, and if they get those magic tries that they always do, they can get the momentum. But what I've found from this Lions team, it's a team that's growing in confidence now. So they're playing at the Den that we know well. And I'm sure it's going to be such an important game for the union itself, just to lift their morale, and maybe also in terms of sponsorships and so on, to excite them as well. So that's going to be a massive game. It's going to be a very difficult one to call, but as an old Lion, I have to say I think the Lions are going to win this game.
Yeah. Eugene, the interesting, and I know you touched on, but the Lions have not been as consistent as they should be. They've got some really good ones. I mean, they beat the Bulls at Loftus. They were really good against the Sharks this weekend. But in between, they had a horror show against the Bulls at Ellis Park. And that's their problem. So if they pitch up like they did against the Sharks this weekend, your money is safe on the Lions. If the team don't pitch up like they did against the Bulls last month and earlier this month, then there's a big problem for the Lions, because the Sharks team will be out for revenge. But it's going to be interesting. It's two massive matches. I mean, Ellis Park and Loftus. If you got a helicopter, watch Ellis Park jump in and fly to Loftus. It'll be worth the money to go watch those two games. And those two guys who's going to be on TV will have value for their money as well.
Yeah, Sean, I think you mentioned the Sharks now that are playing that match at Loftus, which is also going to be tough. But we're also talking about the Stormers. I think it's a big weekend for South African rugby, also to showcase what we have, maybe for some younger players to put up their hands, to be noticed by Rassie and the team.
Agree, 100%. They announced you talk about Rassie and the team. They announced the fixtures. So a bit of news: the Springbok fixtures for the year has been announced and where they're going to be playing. And interesting enough, on June 20, the Springboks play a Barbers team. A Barbers team coached by Scott Robertson, who's just been fired as All Black coach. Well, not just, it was in December, but so Scott Robertson is coming back to coach against the Springboks. I know it's a Barbarians game, but it'll be a good test for the Springboks to start against a team that's going to be well loaded and have some really good players to prepare them for the start of the Nations Cup, which starts 2 weeks later against England at Ellis Park. So it's a massive. I mean, in the next few weeks we'll get stuff about squad announcement or training camps. I know next week we've got a meeting with Rassie, so we'll chat more about that next week. And I'll have some. I'm going to the press conference, so we'll have some info from Rassie about what's happening this year, and we'll have some video to share with our viewers. But it's going to be a massive international season. It's a very unique season. We've got a one-off game against the Wallabies in Perth. Then we start with Ellis Park, and then we play at Loftus, Scotland, and then we play at Wales in Durban. Then we play 4 matches against the All Blacks, and then the year into then we got the one-off match against the Wallabies. We play the year into where we play France again in Paris. I mean, it's such a season to look forward to. But yeah, I mean, for the time being, we've got some really good URC to look forward to this weekend as well.
Yes, and we must get Freek in as soon as possible. I would like to make one more thing and then just sit back and listen to you guys. And the one thing is, I like the gesture of what they did, because I think Scott Robertson was treated pretty badly in the press and whatever. And I think it's nice of him to give him a farewell like that. Secondly, something that we can maybe discuss later with Freek as well. The CEO of New Zealand saying that they actually don't need us in Super Rugby. But if you go look at Super Rugby, the 2 top sides currently is the Brumbies and the Waratahs. So, and the Crusaders are, I think, second last. So I think they need to revisit those statements. But I'm looking forward to hearing from Freek, because we're really going into this interesting phase of rugby now.
Well, if I may ask Eugene a question, we mentioned 4 teams. The role of the number 9 at this stage: France, Ireland, the Bulls with Papier, and the Lions. Their number 9s are playing absolutely top-class rugby and determining the whole game at this stage. What is your view regarding the number 9s at the moment worldwide?
Freek, you in my kraal now, because I was at number 9 many years ago. I love it again. They've been giving the freedom to snipe. I think they've given the freedom to play the opportunities again, and not necessarily just play a pattern of a box kick. So yeah, I think we got some great innovative 9s, and it seems like the coaches again going back, giving them more responsibility to give direction into the game. I love it. And there's a lot of plays off nine. So, yeah, to me, it's great to see them. Even last night with Varsity Cup, watching some of the nines.
Frick, I want to bring you in here and use your expertise. Now, we know there's some interesting calls this weekend, and we're not here, and we'll say this again and again, we're not here to knock the referees. We're here to analyze what we feel might need to be revisited. So in the France game, there was this rolling maul where a flank came in. After the maul had started, the flank came in. He went straight past, and we'll use the clip. We'll share the clip just now, Frick. And this flank came in and joined the maul and went past the ball carrier, and then physically just took the defenders out of the way, right in front of the ball carrier, who then scored. I mean, that can't be legal, Frick.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a big problem at this stage, is that penalty, line out, maul, and then the try scored normally by the hooker. Sort of in a position at the moment with everybody in front of him, and he's got a way to the goal line. I agree with you 100%. Joining there, you can't join in front of the ball carrier, and at that stage he joined in front of the ball carrier and mauled it and turned it around. It doesn't enable the ball carrier without any opposition near to go and score. Now, my first question is, surely, where's the assistant referee? And number two, where's the TMO? I mean, the referee was on the other side, not easy to pick up. But I agree that with your clips, etc., and two players or two sort of officials in a good position to pick this up. And I agree 100% that was definitely obstruction, 100% sure.
I don't think it would have made any difference to the outcome of the game. And I know there's explanations, although they're not official explanations, is because he sort of briefly latched onto the ball carrier, the number 8, and then moved past him, which means, in theory, it's the way I understand the laws, but I might be correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong. But in theory, if he does that, then he's changing his mind, which means he's swimming forward. Unless in that process, the number 8 pulled back, which is also illegal.
Yeah, you see, to a certain extent, the moment you peel off, that is a big problem. Peeling off, and then that guy will be in front of the ball carrier. And that was the whole. That's the whole idea. How to score. Shielding the ball carrier, virtually shielding behind this offside player. But unfortunately, that's obstruction, and it's easy to pick up. But referees are inclined to miss that, and that is a big problem in that ball situation.
Yeah, we will get to that, and I want to touch on the Varsity Cup's new rule, like Eugene said earlier, but. I want to ask you first about there were a couple of yellow cards in the Lions game. And to me, this is another, let's call it a gray area where it's left for interpretation. You know, first of all, I want to understand this process, and maybe you can help us here. The referee or the TMO or somebody says there was possible foul play, head-to-head contact, and then they go through this entire process, which slows the game down tremendously. Even though they stop the clock, the game slows down. I mean, you've got games lasting 90 to 100 minutes because they spend 5 minutes trying to analyze this. And then they find that there's a bunker system. Then they go, who sits in this bunker? I've never heard, they announce a referee, they announce the TMOs, they announce the assistant referees, but they never say who's sitting in the bunker.
Yeah, I agree. In my opinion, if you watched some of these rugby incidents, which I call a rugby incident, it's not foul play. If you talk about foul play, we're talking about reckless and dangerous. Now, the ball carrier, you watch these ball carriers, the moment they move forward, look, they're leading by the head. They've got the ball, they're leading by the head, and the poor tackler, he's in no position, he gets hit. He gets hit by the ball carrier, and he gets yellow carded. To me personally, if you want to penalise, yeah, with a penalty, but not a yellow card, and then referring it, as you've said, to the bunker. Now, unfortunately, all I know, there's a TMO in the bunker. He's got to carry on with his duties. And now suddenly he's got to adjudicate these clips also. I'm not happy. I'm not sure exactly how they do it. But personally, in my opinion, that the ball carrier, you watch those ball carriers leading by the head, making contact, and the poor tackler, he gets hit. And there's never sort of the incident that he's the guilty player, although he's upright and they go through the whole process. But I think it's a harsh call on the yellow cards. And again, it's 14 versus 15. We don't want that. At the most, penalty and carry on and regard this as a rugby incident.
Yeah.
Jan, I just want to add. I want to add 100% with what Freek says there, because when we coach the players, we teach them when you get to contact, low body position, power step into the contact. So exactly what he says is 100% right. And in that split second, the tackler, he doesn't have time to respond to that. And I think that's what they should take in consideration. I agree with Freek. That's a rugby incident. Carry on, give the penalty, whatever. But I mean, sometimes it's really harsh when these guys get calls, and it's referred that they must go up to the bunker, wherever the bunker is. I'm not sure where in the world the bunker is, but I'm glad he know that, because it's a very difficult thing, because you've coached the guys a certain way, and then the execution is exactly how you coach them.
Yeah. Eugene, my understanding is that the bunker is an independent person. So he's not necessarily at the stadium. He's watching television somewhere, or he's sitting in another room. He's not with the TMO. So the TMO is not the bunker. The TMO is just the TMO. So the bunker is, and I know that in the URC there's another room in the stadium where he doesn't hear the crowd noise. He doesn't hear anything. He just has a set of high definition cameras in front of him with access, and that's how it was explained to us, with access to all the different angles and clips. So he's got 8 minutes to sit there and analyze this. But who that person is, we don't know. So it'd be interesting to know what type of person sits in that bunker. Is it, is it a Freek Burger? Is it a Tappa Henning, or who sits in that bunker? What sort of experience? And I think that's the question. That's a grey area if they don't explain to us who or what type of people actually sit in that bunker. And I think that sort of clarity will probably take away a lot of this ambiguity that we talk about, that we're not sure why did he do that, why the referee and the TMO says, oh yeah, it's a yellow card, and then he says no, it's only a yellow card because it was low degree, or it was different accident, and so that adds more confusion and slows the game down.
You see, they've changed the law 9 with 2 words again, which I will repeat: dangerous and reckless. Now, you show me dangerous and reckless from any of those tacklers. Sorry, I just can't buy it.
Yeah. Freek, let's move on to Varsity Cup. I want to ask you, before our time runs out, I want to ask you this new innovation where you score a try and then you've got 2 minutes, like Eugene said, you've got 2 minutes, and then you can score another try. So you get a tap on the 22 and you've got 2 minutes. Do you think that's a good innovation? And what do you feel about some of these innovations in the Varsity Cup?
Great stuff. I mean, Varsity, you're going to play for the crowd. The crowd wants to see that. And Varsity has got this ability of even the 7-point try. Something different. We need something different again. And I'm 100% with that. And if you can keep it, within that time limit, it's ball in hand, it's a positive play, and even the defenders, if they can get the ball, they can go and score. So it's I think it's 100% fantastic that there's innovation like that, and the referee also easy to referee now. It's not a kicking. There's no kicking going on there. It's a question of ball in hand. Let's play. Let's keep the game alive. But again, the spectators, they enjoy it, and that's what I'll give them my way. 100% success with that innovation.
Freek, thank you very, very much. And Eugene, our time is virtually up. So I think let's end it here for this week. We'll definitely be back next week. And as I said, Eugene and Freek, we've got Rassie early next week. So I'll have some stuff from Rassie that we can share with our viewers. And gentlemen, thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Jan. Just I want to say, Freek, I get excited if I hear you speaking about the innovation, and that is so great for Varsity Rugby, because I agree with you guys. It's great to chat, and we'll be back.
Well, thank you very much. Being a referee, it becomes so stale the game. Get something different again. Get something different and get the referees involved also. So I'm 100% with that law.
There we have it. Till next week. See you all. Cheers.
Dankie.